I found a 7th trail camera strapped to a tree at my campsite. I had only brought 6. It was identical to mine. Same model, same camouflage strap, same weatherproof case. When I checked the SD card, it had 47 photos on it. All of them were me, sleeping, cooking, pissing in the woods, sitting by the fire, taken over the last 2 nights from angles I'd never positioned my cameras. The timestamp on the first photo was 30 minutes before I'd even arrived at this site. I should probably start from the beginning. My name's Colin, and I've been doing wildlife photography for about 8 years now. Started as a hobby while I was working IT in Albuquerque, then went full-time 3 years back when I landed a contract with New Mexico Game and Fish. The work's simple enough. Document migration patterns, get population counts, capture behavior for research studies, elk, mostly, sometimes mule deer or pronghorn. The state pays well, and I get to spend weeks at a time in the backcountry, which beats a cubicle any day of the week. This particular trip was a solo run into the Chuska Mountains, right along that border where New Mexico meets Arizona. October 2024. The elk rut was winding down, but the herds were still moving through the high country before winter pushed them to lower elevations. I had a research grant that needed autumn migration data, and this range was perfect. Dense ponderosa pine, natural meadows, water sources, and remote enough that I wouldn't run into hunters or hikers screwing up the animal behavior. I'd packed in on foot from the Forest Road 82 trailhead around noon on a Thursday, about a 6-mile hike to the site I'd picked from satellite imagery, a small clearing with a seasonal creek on the eastern edge and good tree cover for hanging cameras. The weather was clear, temperature in the low 50s during the day, probably dip into the 30s at night. Perfect conditions. I had my tent, sleeping bag rated to 20 degrees, a week's worth of freeze-dried meals, water filtration setup, and my camera equipment. 6 Bushnell trail cameras, top-of-the-line units with infrared night vision, 20 megapixel resolution, and 3-second trigger speeds. I'd positioned them in a grid pattern around my campsite, each one facing outward to cover roughly 60 degrees of the surrounding forest. The idea was to capture any elk movement through the area while also keeping an eye on the perimeter. I'd done this setup dozens of times. Standard protocol. I mounted them about chest high on tree trunks, angled slightly downward to catch both ground level and standing animals. Camera 1 faced north toward the creek, Camera 2 northeast, Camera 3 east, Camera 4 southeast toward the trail I'd hiked in on. Camera 5 covered the south. Camera 6 handled the western approach, overlapping fields of view with minimal gaps. Each one was strapped tight with Python-style camo webbing, memory cards formatted, batteries fresh. The first night was quiet. I'd set up camp in the clearing's center. Tent positioned on a flat spot I'd cleared of pine needles and rocks. Bear bag hung from a high branch about 50 yards out, small fire ring assembled from stones near the tent. I kept the fire low, didn't need much heat, and I didn't want to spook any wildlife that might pass through. Ate a pouch of beef stroganoff, boiled some coffee, and sat watching the stars come out through the pine canopy. Around 10 p.m., I killed the fire and checked each camera with my headlamp. All 6 showed green status lights, active and recording. I made my rounds counterclockwise, checking the straps and angles, making sure nothing had shifted. Everything looked solid. Back at the tent, I logged the setup in my field notebook. Date, time, camera positions, weather conditions, moon phase, 3/4 waxing. Plenty of light for the IR sensors to work with. I slept fine. Woke up twice to piss and once because something large moved through the underbrush south of camp, probably an elk or mule deer. Heard it snort and shuffle off. Normal sounds. By first light I was up and brewing coffee on my camp stove. That's when I did my first card check. Standard routine. I'd pull the SD cards from each camera every morning. review the previous night's captures on my laptop, log any wildlife activity, then reformat the cards and put them back. It's tedious work but necessary. You'd be surprised how much junk footage trail cameras generate. Branches moving in wind, false triggers from temperature changes, the occasional mouse walking across the lens. I started with camera 1, popped the SD card, walked back to my tent, fired up the laptop. 43 images from the previous evening and night, mostly empty forest shots. 3 frames showed a mule deer buck passing through around 11:30 p.m. Good, clear images. I logged it and moved to camera 2. 71 images, nothing interesting. Some kind of rodent kept triggering it around 2 a.m. Camera 3 had a coyote pass by at 4:15 in the morning. Healthy looking animal, moving at a trot. I noted it. Camera 4, camera 5, camera 6. All routine. A couple of elk cows on camera 6 just before dawn. Exactly what I was hoping for. I reformatted all the cards, reinstalled them, and settled in for a day of camp maintenance and note-taking. The weather held clear. I ate lunch, read a book, took a short hike to scout the creek, found some elk tracks in the mud near the water, fresh, probably from that morning. The rut might be over, but the bulls were still moving through. I marked the location on my GPS unit and headed back to camp. That afternoon I noticed something odd. Camera 3's angle had changed, not by much, maybe 5 or 10 degrees, but enough that I caught it when I was doing my evening check. The frame was tilted slightly upward from where I'd positioned it. I stood there looking at it for a good minute, trying to figure out if I'd just mounted it wrong the day before, but I'm careful with this stuff. I've done it enough times that I know when something's off. I loosened the strap and repositioned it back to the original angle, tightened it down hard, checked the other 5 cameras. All of them were exactly as I'd left them. Just camera 3. Weird, but not alarming. Could have been a bear rubbing against a tree, or maybe the strap had settled overnight. I made a note in my log and let it go. Second night I kept the fire going a little longer. Not for warmth, more just for company. There's a specific kind of quiet you get in the mountains when you're alone, and after 2 days it starts pressing in on you. Not in a bad way, just noticeable. I sat there feeding small sticks into the flames and listening to the forest settle. An owl called from somewhere west of camp. Another answered from the north. Barred owls probably. Common enough up here. Around 11 p.m. I banked the fire and crawled into my tent. The temperature had dropped faster than the night before. I could see my breath in the headlamp beam. I stripped down to my base layers, climbed into my sleeping bag, and killed the light. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but it was deep night. No moon visible through the tent mesh, just darkness and the sound of wind moving through the pines. I lay there listening, trying to figure out what had pulled me out of sleep. Sometimes your brain picks up on things before you consciously register them. A change in the background noise, a smell, something. Then I heard it. A soft mechanical click from somewhere outside the tent. I knew that sound. It was the shutter mechanism on a Bushnell trail camera. I sat up slowly, listening. Another click. Then another. 3 distinct triggers from 3 different directions. My cameras were going off in sequence. Camera 2, then camera 5, then camera 1. Too fast to be separate animals. It sounded like something was moving around the perimeter of my camp, triggering each unit as it passed. I found my headlamp and turned it on, keeping the beam low, unzipped the tent, and looked out. The clearing was empty. Fire ring just coals now, glowing faint orange. Trees black against a slightly less black sky. I couldn't see anything moving. But as I watched, camera 6 clicked, then camera 3. Whatever was out there was circling me counterclockwise. I grabbed my bear spray from the tent vestibule and stepped outside in my boots and long underwear. The cold hit me immediately. I swept the headlamp beam across the tree line, looking for eye shine. Nothing. But I could hear something moving through the underbrush now. Not running, just walking steadily. Footsteps crunching pine needles and dry grass. Camera 4 clicked behind me. I spun around, putting the light on it. The camera was pointed at me now. Not at the forest, at me. The lens was angled directly toward where I stood in the center of camp. When I walked over to it, the strap was loose. Not undone, just loose enough that the camera had rotated on the tree trunk. I tightened it back down and repositioned it to face southeast like it was supposed to. My hands were shaking a little. Not from fear exactly, more from adrenaline and confusion. When I turned around, camera 1 clicked. I made a full circuit of the camp, checking each unit. Cameras 2, 3, 5, and 6 were all fine. Camera 1 had also rotated to face inward. I fixed it. The footsteps had stopped. The forest was quiet again except for wind and that distant owl. I went back to the tent, but I didn't sleep much the rest of the night. Morning card check was when things got worse. I pulled camera 4's SD card first, since that was the one I'd repositioned. 318 images. Way more than normal. I loaded them on the laptop and started scrolling through. The first 100 or so were normal. Forest shots, empty frames, the coyote from the previous morning passing through again. Then around 1 a.m., the sequence changed. The images showed the clearing, my tent, the fire ring, me standing outside in my headlamp beam holding the bear spray, but the angle was wrong. These photos were taken from inside the camp, pointing outward. Like the camera had rotated 180 degrees, I could see myself in frame, lit up by my own headlamp, looking directly at the camera. I scrolled forward, more images of me walking to camera 1, me adjusting camera 4 itself, and in that shot I could see my face clearly, concentrated, hands on the strap. Then the angle shifted back to the forest, normal positioning. The rest of the images were empty frames. I sat there staring at the laptop screen, trying to logic it out. The camera had rotated, that much was obvious, but why? How? The strap had been tight when I'd mounted it. Bears don't rotate cameras 180 degrees. They knock them down or tear them off. This was precise. I checked the other cards. Camera 1 had a similar sequence, normal shots, then suddenly inward-facing frames showing my tent in the clearing, then back to normal after I'd fixed it. 247 images total. The rest were routine. Nothing unusual. I sat there for a long time, drinking cold coffee and thinking. There were a few possible explanations. Equipment malfunction, but both cameras failing in the exact same way at the same time didn't make sense. Animal interference, but again, too precise. Human interference, but I was 6 miles from the nearest road in terrain that most people wouldn't bother hiking without a good reason. And I hadn't seen any other boot prints on the trail coming in. I decided to add 2 more cameras, add backups in my pack. I always bring extras in case a unit fails. I mounted camera 7 on a tree directly above my tent, angled downward to cover the immediate camp area. Camera 8 went on a thick pine about 20 yards out, positioned to watch the approach from the creek. If something or someone was messing with my setup, I'd have better coverage. The rest of the day I stayed close to camp. Didn't feel like hiking. I kept glancing at the tree line, watching for movement. Nothing, just wind and birds, and the occasional rustle of squirrels in the canopy. Normal forest sounds. That evening, I made dinner early. Rehydrated chili mac. Ate it fast. I wanted to be in the tent before full dark. Don't know why, just instinct. By the time the sun dropped behind the ridgeline, I had everything secured. Bear bag hung, food locked up, gear organized, fire going. I checked all 8 cameras as dusk settled in, green lights on every unit, straps tight, angles correct. I made extra sure of it, used my compass to verify each camera's facing direction, tightened the straps until the webbing bit into the bark. Back at the fire, I tried to relax. Didn't work. I kept thinking about those photos, me standing there in the dark, staring at a camera that had somehow turned itself around. The logical part of my brain said equipment failure, the part that had grown up hearing stories from my grandmother. She was Jicarilla Apache, spent her childhood near Dulce. That part was saying something else. There are things you don't talk about in certain areas, things with names you don't say out loud, especially at night, especially alone. I'm not traditional. I don't follow a lot of the old protocols, but I know enough to recognize when something feels wrong, and this felt wrong. I let the fire die around 9 p.m. and got in the tent. Sleep didn't come. I lay there in my bag, listening. The forest was loud that night, wind pushing through the pines and waves, branches creaking, something scratching at bark nearby, probably a porcupine. I told myself it was a porcupine. Around midnight, the cameras started clicking, all of them, in sequence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, then again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Mechanical shutters firing in perfect rhythm, circling the camp over and over. I lay there, listening to it, counting the sequence. 16 full rotations. Then it stopped. Silence. I waited. My heart was hammering. I could hear blood rushing in my ears. I thought about getting up, about checking the cameras, about packing my shit and hiking out in the dark. But 6 miles of mountain trail at night with no moon. That's how people get hurt. Twisted ankles, wrong turns, hypothermia. I'd be better off waiting for dawn. Then my laptop chimed. It was sitting in the corner of the tent where I'd left it, lid closed. Supposed to be asleep, but the startup chime played clear as day. Windows booting up. I hadn't touched it. I sat up, staring at the closed laptop. The chime played again. Then the screen light glowed through the closed lid. Bright white, then settling to the desktop background. I didn't move, just watched it. The trackpad started clicking, like someone was using it, opening files. I could hear the hard drive spinning, accessing data. Then the photo viewer launched. I could see the glow changing as images cycled on the screen. Slowly, I reached over and opened the lid. The laptop was scrolling through tonight's photos, except I hadn't pulled the SD cards yet. These weren't on the hard drive, but there they were. Images loading one after another. The clearing, my tent, the fire ring, me sitting by the fire earlier, me walking to hang the bear bag, me checking the cameras at dusk, all taken from camera 7, the one I'd mounted above my tent. But mixed in with those shots were others, images I knew I hadn't taken, angles that didn't match any of my 8 cameras. A photo of my tent from ground level, looking up, a shot of my boots outside the tent door, taken from maybe 3 inches away, a close-up of the tent mesh window, and through it, barely visible, my face in the sleeping bag. The slideshow stopped on one image. It was a photo of the laptop screen. This laptop, taken from behind me. I could see the back of my head in the frame, lit by the screen glow, and on the laptop display in the photo I could see the same image, nested, a picture of the laptop showing a picture of the laptop showing a picture of the laptop, repeating into infinity. The image had a timestamp, 2 minutes ago. I slammed the laptop shut, grabbed my headlamp and bear spray, unzipped the tent, and scrambled out into the clearing. The cold hit me like a wall, but I didn't care. I swept the light across the tree line, spinning in place. Nothing, no movement, no eye shine, no sounds except my own breathing. Then I saw camera 7. It was still mounted above the tent, but the lens was pointed straight down now, directly at the tent door, at me. I walked backward away from it, keeping the light on it. As I watched, the camera rotated, slowly, following me. The lens tracked my movement across the clearing like it was on a motorized gimbal, except Bushnell trail cameras don't have motorized gimbals. I ran to the tree and ripped the camera off. The strap came away easily. Too easily. It hadn't been tight at all. I threw the unit on the ground and stomped on it. Plastic cracked. I picked it up and smashed it against the tree trunk until the casing split and the circuit board fell out. That's when I heard the clicking behind me. Not my cameras. A different sound. Faster. Like someone snapping their fingers in rapid rhythm. Click, 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 click. Coming from the direction of the creek. I turned and put the headlamp on it. At the edge of the clearing, just inside the tree line, something was crouched. It was tall. Even crouched, it was taller than the underbrush around it. The headlamp beam hit it and reflected back from 2 points. Eyes catching the light. Yellow-white, unblinking. The clicking got faster. I realized it was coming from the thing's mouth, or what I thought was its mouth. The proportions were wrong. Too much neck, arms too long. It was pressed low to the ground, but the limbs were bent at angles that didn't make sense. I couldn't move. I just stood there with the destroyed camera in my hand and the light shaking across this thing that was watching me from 30 feet away. Then it stood up. The movement was wrong. It didn't rise like a person standing. It unfolded, limbs extending in sequence, joints bending backward, the torso lifting last. When it was fully upright, it was at least 7 feet tall, maybe more. Lean and dark and shaped almost like a man, but not quite. The arms hung too low. The legs were too long and digitigree, like a dog's hind legs. The clicking stopped. It tilted its head to one side. Watching me, I raised the bear spray and screamed at it. Just noise. Incoherent and loud. The thing didn't move, didn't react. Just stood there with its head cocked at that wrong angle. Then it raised one arm, slowly, and pointed at me. The finger was too long, too many joints. Every camera in my grid started clicking at once. Rapid fire, dozens of shutter sounds from all directions. I spun around and saw them. Cameras I'd mounted, cameras I'd destroyed, and cameras I'd never seen before. Strapped to trees all around the clearing, dozens of them, all pointed at me, all firing in sequence like a strobe. I ran. Didn't think. Didn't plan. Just dropped everything and sprinted for the trail. My headlamp beam bounced across trees and rocks as I crashed through the underbrush. I could hear something behind me. Not running. Walking. Fast. Footsteps that covered too much ground. Click, 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 click from somewhere to my left. More from the right. The trail was barely visible in the dark, but I knew the general direction. Downhill, east, toward the road. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs cramped. Fell, twice. Got up, kept going. Behind me, the clicking was everywhere, moving through the trees parallel to the trail. Ahead of me. Behind me. I couldn't tell anymore. I just focused on the ground in front of my feet and kept moving. Then I hit the creek. I'd forgotten about it. The trail crossed it about 2 miles down from my camp. Normally you could step across on rocks, but the recent rains had it running higher. I splashed into water up to my knees. The cold was shocking. I waded across, slipping on smooth stones, and pulled myself up the far bank. The clicking stopped. I turned around, shining the light back across the creek. Something was standing on the opposite bank. Same thing from the camp, or maybe a different one. I couldn't tell. It was just standing there at the water's edge, watching me, not moving. The eyes caught the light and threw it back. I waited. It didn't cross, just stood there. After a long moment, it turned and walked back into the trees. Upright this time, almost casual. The footsteps faded. I didn't wait around. I turned and kept moving down the trail as fast as I could manage. My legs were shaking, wet boots squelching. I fell once more and stayed down for a minute, just breathing, then got up and continued. It took me almost 4 hours to reach the trailhead. Should have taken 2. I kept stopping to listen, kept checking behind me, but nothing followed. The forest was quiet, normal quiet. My truck was right where I'd left it, covered in dust and pine needles. I got in, locked the doors, and sat there shaking for a solid 10 minutes before I could get the key in the ignition. Started the engine, turned the heat on full blast, sat there until first light started showing over the ridge. I drove to the ranger station at Sheep Springs. Got there around 8 a.m. The ranger on duty was a Navajo woman named Shirley, probably in her 50s. I told her I'd had some kind of wildlife encounter at my camp and needed to report it. She took down my information, asked what I'd seen. I told her about the cameras, the photos, the thing in the clearing. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded and asked me to wait. She went into a back office and came out with an older man, not in uniform, but clearly someone official. He introduced himself as Lawrence, didn't give a last name. The Chuska site, he said. Upper Meadow near Little Water Canyon. I nodded. That was the area. You set up trail cameras, he continued. 8 of them, I said. Standard wildlife documentation grid. Lawrence looked at Shirley, then back to me. You're not the first. We've had 3 other photographers pull out of that area in the last 2 years. Same story. Equipment problems. Cameras repositioned. Photos from angles they didn't set up. What is it? I asked. He didn't answer directly. Just said that area is restricted now. We're updating the forest maps. You won't be able to get permits for that site anymore. But what? Sometimes, Shirley interrupted quietly, the best way to respect the wildlife is to not document it. Some things aren't meant to be photographed. Lawrence handed me a form. Incident report. Asked me to fill it out, leave out the parts that sounded too unusual, and they'd file it as a standard wildlife encounter. He also recommended I not return for any of my equipment. You got out, he said. That's what matters. Gear's replaceable. I filled out the form, gave them my contact information. They filed it under incident number CSF24107. Told me I'd receive a follow-up call if they needed anything else. I never got that call. Before I left, Shirley walked me to my truck. She asked me if I'd grown up around here. I told her about my grandmother and Dulce. Then, she said, some things copy. That's what they do. They watch, and they learn, and they copy. Cameras teach them, GPS teaches them. The more technology you bring in, the more they have to work with. What are they? I asked. She looked at me for a long moment. Things that wear shapes that aren't theirs. You're lucky you knew when to run. You're especially lucky you crossed water. I didn't ask anything else. Just got in my truck and drove. I haven't been back to the Chuskas. Haven't set up a trail camera grid since then either. I still do wildlife photography, but I use handheld equipment now. No remote monitoring. No overnight grid setups. And I don't work alone in certain areas anymore. The Navajo Nation, backcountry, parts of the Jicarilla Reservation, anywhere with restricted zones I don't fully understand. The state still has my documentation contract, but I pick my sites carefully now. I run them by Lawrence first. Turns out he's a cultural liaison with Fish and Game. He approves or denies based on criteria he doesn't fully explain. I don't push it. 3 months after the incident, I got a package at my apartment. No return address. Inside was an SD card. Just one. I almost threw it away. Almost. But curiosity got me. I loaded it on my laptop in a public library. Didn't want to do it at home. The card had 47 photos. All of them were me at the Cheska campsite, sleeping in my tent, sitting by the fire, checking cameras, walking to the creek. The angles were impossible. From above the tent, from ground level, from inside the tent. The final photo was taken from behind me as I ran down the trail, my back lit by the headlamp glow, and in the far edge of the frame, barely visible, something tall and dark keeping pace just inside the tree line. The timestamp on the last photo was 2:52 a.m., the exact minute I'd crossed the creek. I destroyed the SD card, broke it into pieces, and threw them in 3 different dumpsters across town. So here's what I'll tell you, and I hope you're listening. If you're setting up trail cameras in remote areas, particularly in the Southwest, particularly in zones that border reservation land, check your count every single day. If you find equipment you didn't place, don't review the footage. Don't take the SD cards. Leave them alone. Better yet, pack up and get out. If your cameras start repositioning themselves, if you find photos from angles you didn't set up, if your gear starts documenting you instead of the wildlife, cross running water and don't look back. Don't try to retrieve your equipment. Don't go back for proof. Some things learn by watching, some things copy what they see, and some things have been in those mountains a lot longer than we've had cameras to point at them. They don't like being photographed, but they've learned how to return the favor. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more encounters from places we're not supposed to document, hit that like button and subscribe. There are places in this country where the wildlife watches back, and I've got more stories from photographers who learned that the hard way. Stay safe out there and check your camera count.